a PhD massage researcher. She's one of the few massage researchers who has funding from the NIH. And so if you want to talk about people that are pushing the science side of this and pushing us into legitimacy on the national level, you deserve a little bit of a hand. So let's do that now. Cynthia French.
Thank you. But you know what? My favorite thing, I do research presentations a lot at research conferences, and my favorite thing is doing these clinical presentations to massage therapists in the whole world. And that's because I get to tell stories in part, and also because I get more than 10 minutes. Because it's really hard to talk about what we do, and all the ramifications of what we do and what the research shows when you get 10 minutes. So anyway, so yeah, I'm at the University of Washington, and I'm housed in the School of Nursing, and I've been there a while. It's adding up. So, and I also now run the Center for Mindful Body Awareness, which is a nonprofit. I'm kind of coming back to my roots a little bit more at this point in my career to really do more teaching of the approach I'm going to tell you some about, but I'm not going to only talk about that. So I was asked to talk about integrating mindfulness into massage therapy practice. So this is basically what we're going to do today, and the time we have is start with some definitions. What are we really talking about when we talk about mindfulness, and what the hell is interception? And then why is doing this work helpful to massage therapy practice? Some of that we just heard about, why it's helpful to massage therapy practice. How some kind of concrete examples of how to integrate this work into your sessions. And then talk a little bit about what the research, I'm going to draw from my research, because as far as I know, I'm still the only researcher that's using touch and mindfulness and doing research. So to talk about, I would talk about other people, but I'm not sure, I don't know who else is doing that. And how it informs what we can understand, more of what we can understand about the role of mindfulness in practice. So to start, Farah gave us a really lovely definition of mindfulness. And it's often just, this is the simpler kind of honed down definition that really came out of Kabat-Zinn's work, is that it's present moment awareness with an attitude of non-judgment and compassion. And interoception, who's familiar with this word? Some of you. It's a word that it is relatively new to our profession, or new to clinical care in general. But what it means is processing of input, sensory information in the body. And it's been used more traditionally in basic science, where they've been looking at the viscera in our bodies and the information that comes from, for example, your heart racing. You feel that, you know when it's happening, or your gut, and you feel the churning of your gut, or your stomach telling you you're hungry. Interoception is all about maintaining homeostasis of the body. How do we stay in balance? So when you're cold, you need to put on warmer clothes. When you're hungry, you need to eat. When you're tired, you need to sleep. When your heart is racing too fast, you probably need to slow down a little, right? Like all those things. So those are the things we're aware of, but a lot of interoceptive processes happen unconsciously. The things we can be aware of, that I was just giving examples of, are what have been traditionally understood as the aspects of interoception that are conscious. But we're now in clinical science, we're really expanding that understanding to include all the other more subtle things that we pay attention to in our profession all the time. All the sensations in our bodies that we experience. From the things that massage therapists and our clients bring to us are, the sense of tightness in the body, the sense of constriction, the sense of pain, the sense of anxiety. So it's both the physical sensations and the emotional sensations that are there. And we could spend an hour just kind of throwing out words that we hear, words that we personally experience. So that's now the understanding, this broadest understanding, and we call it interoceptive awareness because it's the awareness part of interoception of what this is. So it includes unconscious and conscious material. The purpose of it is to help us balance and regulate ourselves. And my work really involves this interplay between mindfulness and interoception. And they totally overlap. So who here has ever done any mindfulness meditation? Even like 2 seconds, or taken a big class, or, just quietly been asked to meditate before something has started. Most of us have had at least a tiny bit of exposure to that. Sorry, my mouth is really dry. So when we learn about mindfulness meditation, it's all about paying attention and observing inner experience. And oftentimes, the first things that get taught, the most fundamental things, are bringing your attention to the sensation of the inhale and the exhale of the breath. Everybody's probably done that, right? Or most of you have probably done that. It's a very grounding thing. It brings you in. It focuses you on your internal sensations immediately, right? So everything else fades, all that external environment, that grocery list, those things that take us out of presence. It brings us in. And that's why it's so powerful to pay attention to sensation. And that's why the breath and that feeling of the exhale and our diaphragm moving is very, very accessible to most of us. So it's the first thing that is often introduced in mindfulness meditation. But that's interoception, right? That's paying attention to the sensation in your body, a sensation in your body, maybe multiple sensations in your body. That is interoception. So you can see how it's fundamental to mindfulness, absolutely fundamental. And at the same time, if you're going to engage, so I can be talking to you, I can be working, I can be doing multitasking and be aware that my stomach's gurgling, right? So I can have interoceptive awareness while I'm doing other things. That information can come to my awareness. But if I'm going to do this more interoceptive inquiry, mindfulness inquiry into how am I really feeling inside? I can't really do that if I'm busy typing on the computer, if I'm running to catch my kid in my car, if I'm busily making dinner real fast because I have company coming and they're going to arrive any minute. I cannot at the same time. That's too much, right? If anybody knows how to do that all at the same time. I mean, I may be able to tune in for 2 seconds and go, oof, I'm going too fast. How do I know that? Like, I may be able to do that, and that's really helpful to me. And that is the kind of daily, little teeny ways that we can use mindfulness in our daily life that help us go, oh, I'm noticing something. I'm noticing while I'm in the middle of doing a million other things, and it tells me something, and it's sensation in my body, and it's really helpful for me to regulate, right? To regulate. But if we're going to be in a therapeutic situation with ourselves or in our bodywork practice, our bodywork session, whether you're the therapist or the client, you can't have all that going on if you want to go seriously inside and kind of do this, the curiosity piece. Everyone says, curiosity is a big deal. It's how I understand what I do, right? To kind of come in and have that curiosity. How am I really in here? It takes really this mindfulness piece of letting everything else kind of go away so you can really pay attention. And that is why these two things are so enormously part of one another. To introspectively pay attention inside to my sensations, I have to be in this mindful presence in myself. And to be engaged in mindfulness involves fundamentally paying attention introspectively. So I just wanted to do that. People often ask me about, they think of these things as being separate, but they're not. They're not. They're totally intertwined. So we know from neuroscience research about the regulation piece. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but neuroscience research, which has really paid attention to interoception because of how big mindfulness has been in the last decade and has brought neuroscientists into it, has led to our understanding of the sensory pathways in the body, where they go in the brain, that part of the brain is where regulation and homeostatic function takes place, that it is also absolutely critical for emotion regulation. And so these things we now know. And there's been a lot written about it, both from a scientific neuroscience perspective and also in psychology mostly. But there's still a lot we don't know. There's a lot we don't know. But we do know some of these basic things about the importance of regulation in terms of paying attention to interoception, or the role of interoception for regulation. So what is emotion regulation? It's the ability to modulate the intensity, duration of emotional responses in order to promote goal-directed behavior. And being dysregulated are having intense or labile emotions, poor distress tolerance, experiential avoidance, lack of self-control, and vulnerability or more risk for pathology. So I'm going to come back to this slide later, but homeostasis, or this balance, we often talk about in the autonomic nervous system, where it's this constant balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, being escalated and going too fast, or feeling scared or frightened, and being relaxed. And again, this is always a play autonomically in our systems and is totally related to regulation. So when we think about how do we study interoception, what are the things we want to pay attention to is also this system. And I'm going to show you some results from a study that did recently. So, but let's talk about mindfulness and bodywork practice, because that's really why we're here. So Farah was just talking about the role of therapist presence. And therapist presence is absolutely fundamental and includes that attention to the client and the relationship with the client. So she just totally gave you that background. We cannot be teaching our clients to be present if we're not present ourselves. So that is really fundamental. And staying in presence when we're in the therapeutic interaction in our sessions, as she was saying, it's hard. And it's all about just constantly coming back. So everyone who's done mindfulness meditation knows that your mind travels, right? You do start thinking about the grocery list. You do start thinking about that conversation that bugged you that you'd really have to go back to. You do start noticing that knee pain. All those things happen, right? They're normal. It's just who we are. And it's about coming back. It's over and over again. Like Farah was saying, it's coming back inside. In mindfulness meditation, the word is mind wandering. It's a beautiful word. It's just exactly what we do, right? So it's all about learning to come back. So when we teach these skills for body workers and clinicians, that's what we teach first. You have to be really comfortable with this in order to move on to helping your client learn these skills. So how do we help our client learn these skills too? I mean, just by us being in more presence, they will naturally be in more presence. You've all talked about that already. How you feel when you go to see a massage therapist. You feel more present when your clinician is present. But there's more we can do. There's more we can do. There are things we can do as therapists to promote our clients' capacity to be present in their bodies. And they're simple things. Besides our own presence, which is not always simple, but the concept's simple, right? It's just constantly coming back inside. But the things we can do to help our clients are things like, besides us being present, asking them what they notice, inviting them to come inside their bodies, right? We all are trained to do this routine. You go down the front, you go up, back, and we get into this automaticity of what we do. And especially if we're seeing too many people, and especially if our own lives are feeling stressful to us, then that's the natural go-to, is, okay, I'm just going to go into my automatic, I'm going to do what I have to do, I'm going to get through the day, right? And sometimes we have to do that. But if we can pause from that, and we can say, how can I help besides me being present, how can I help my client come in more? It's that invitation. And the invitation is often both with our touch, with our presence and our energy, and it's with our voice. So I was talking to Mike last night about this thing that happened years ago when we got a bunch of massage therapists together who'd been in practice for a very long time to talk about what's best practice. And one of the things that emerged from this absolutely beautiful 2-day meeting was how much really experienced massage therapists talk to their clients. They do these intakes, they talk about what's going on in the room, about what they're feeling, about what they're noticing. And I sat there, I was amazed. I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone in the world. This is really how really experienced massage therapists often work. Now, we may have had a bias in the room. Only certain people were invited, but I think the truth is there's a lot of that goes on, right? A lot of us talk to our clients. And so we talked in the moment. We asked them how they're doing before they come in. We talked to them on the client. They talk to us all the time, right? They're on the table. This is what's going on. They may tell you a story. But if we can say, what are you noticing right now? It's the simplest question on the planet. What are you noticing right now? I'm working on your shoulder and it's really tight. What's happening in here? And that simple question will bring someone in. It's so simple, right? And then you get the answer. Oh, I'm feeling so much better. And you go, great. What else are you noticing right now? Well, they might pause and they'll go, well, and you can start feeling them paying attention. Your hands are on them and you can start feeling them pay attention. They're actually bringing their attention right into where you're working instead of, spacing out and being on the massage table. And they go, well, I guess I feel more spaciousness in that shoulder. I go, wow, more spaciousness in that shoulder. That's a lot to feel, right? That's a lot of information they just got for themselves and that you just got as a therapist. And what's happening? In that moment, that person is inside. They're doing what I call interoceptive awareness. They're being present in their bodies and they're attending to their sensation inside their body. It's not what's happening out here when I press, which matters, but it's inside. They're inside the joint. They've attended to that. That's interoceptive awareness. And it seems simple, but it's actually not always. It's actually not always. There are people for whom being in the body is not easy, right? You might ask them, what do you notice right now? And you might get back, nothing. Or, oh, I don't know. I guess I'm noticing that I'm comfortable. And then that's a perfect cue. It's like this person doesn't know what you mean. They don't know what you're asking them to do. And so then we become educators. And that is part of what happened in this best practices thing that we had years ago. It's like we are educators in the moment. Every single second of that session, we can be educators. And so we can say, okay, in my mind, I'll go, okay, what's going on with this client? They're here, and their shoulders relaxing. What am I aware of? I'm aware of the relaxation. Something's happening in the shoulder, but they're not able to tell me that they're aware of that. So then what do? I back way up and I say, let's talk about you bringing your attention right here where my hands are. And then I'm using my hands as the tool with which I teach. And I'll say, can you feel my hands on your shoulder? So you're backing way up. You're going back to the super fundamental things that are super concrete, super concrete. So of course, the person can feel your hands on their shoulder, right? So that's where you start. And you say, okay, so you feel my hands on my shoulder. Can you tell me what you're aware of right here underneath where my hands are? So it's a process of using words and actually helping someone to find words to identify what they do feel. What are their sensations? And then bit by bit, you grow their skill in this department. It is a skill to be able to identify what you feel. It is a skill to be able to bring your attention inside your body in a mindful way. It is a skill to be able to stay there in a sustained presence, which is what mindfulness is. Those are all skills, and we can teach them. And there's so many little ways that we can teach them that are pretty simple that we can get started with by just asking and inviting someone to pay attention. So this process is when we do this kind of dance between the therapist and the client, it does shift things energetically. The focus, everything slows down. Like if I'm going to have invite someone to pay attention to their shoulder, I don't have time then to be continuing to be massaging their arm and going down into their legs. All of a sudden it's like 10 minutes that's now just focused on this particular task of helping them understand what I'm asking them to do and seeing if we can make a little movement in that department. So that means I have less time to do all the other things. So the whole session and what happens in that session changes a little bit. And one of the things that we found with doing more teaching of this approach is that this can be a barrier for massage therapists to actually start doing this work is often they feel like, well, but my client expects me to get through that whole body massage. When that's what they come for, and they come every week, and that's what they want. And I'm nervous about not doing that. And yet they want to do more of this work. But how do I do this? How do I help do this? And my advice is you start with just the simple question. Can you bring yourself in? Can you tell me what you feel? And you just build from there. And that doesn't take any more time. You can still go on and do your full body massage, but you've started asking them to come in. You've started asking them to pay attention with you, to bring their attention inside and increase their awareness. But if you do more of this work, it does change the pace of a session and exactly what happens in it. I'll be honest about that. So this is really, I've basically gone over most of the slide already, actually. So we'll just keep going. So interceptive awareness has these components to it. And if you start reading about it, you will find that you'll find other people talking about this. But it has these components. The ability to identify sensation, so have words to describe what you feel. The ability to bring your attention inside to access those spaces in the body. And let me talk about that for a minute. So in mindfulness meditation, mostly what happens is this attention to the diaphragm moving, the sensation of the inhale and the exhale. That's great. It's absolutely wonderful. But oftentimes, that's it. People don't really develop the skills to bring their attention down to their left knee where they have got some pain. Or back here in this spot that is always achy. Or right here where I often feel a lump in my throat. Right? There's very little of that is really trained in mindfulness meditation, but it is absolutely an incredible opportunity that we have as body workers to help our clients learn to do. So they come to us because they're uncomfortable and they're stressed out, and they may or may not be in major pain. It doesn't matter. There are places in their bodies that need attention, and they know it, and as you work on it, you know it. And so how can we help them bring their attention into those spaces? And that's what this work that I do is all about. It's how do we teach people to do that, access it, and then what is the meaning of doing that to them? And that's what this evaluation or appraisal piece is about. And so you get there, and the meaning comes from them. The meaning comes from what is it like to be in this place, and what emerges for them about what they notice. That when you stay somewhere for a while, the relationship to that place changes. It started out feeling really tight, and then if you stay there for a while, it actually starts opening up. Or I went down into my belly, and I had that fluttery feeling that everyone talks about, like if you're nervous or anxious. And then as I stayed there, I made the association between that nervous fluttery and the fact that I've got this thing going on in my life that I really haven't been paying attention to. Like the way our brains help us make associations, that link between physical sensation and emotional sensation, that is so fundamental, but often we don't pay enough attention to. So it's these aspects all together that are really important for interoception, and it's mindful presence awareness of the body. It's the same thing, but they're different components, and we can start with the simple questions of what do you notice, how would you describe it? That's that identity part, but it's absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. And then we can move into helping people to be able to be more present in different parts of their body and learn to sustain attention. So why do this? I mean, we're talking about getting information from the body, but so it's really about this self-understanding that can come, but it promotes greater self-care. So you have a client who comes in, we have this story of coming down into the shoulder, and the client who says, oh, I feel a little more space in there. And then maybe you just hang out with this area of their body a little bit, and your hands are cupping their shoulder. And you say, yeah, that's really great that you're noticing more space in here. I'm going to work on this a little bit more. You know, we can feel these places where it could use a little more massage and kind of opening this up anymore. Can you just pay attention to what you notice inside as we do this? So the client is just hanging out with you while you both are paying attention to this area of the body. And that's this co-presence. It's this beautiful thing when that it's like two people are like, woo, you know, attending to the same place together. It creates a lot of energy, and it feels good, right? So, but then the client goes, oh, you might ask, what are you noticing now? Because you noticed something happened. So the call comes back to, what did I notice? I noticed some shift to what the client noticed. And the client says, well, actually, I'm realizing just how much I don't pay attention to my posture. I mean, we're talking basic stuff. The client says, you know, I am constantly doing this when I'm sitting at my desk. And I'm realizing how much I need to stop doing this. So it comes back to behavior change. It all comes back to behavior change. You have somebody else who comes in, a stressed out mom with 2 little kids who just needs her hour off. And you're doing the massage, and you ask in the middle of it, what are you noticing right now? And the mom says, oh, God, I'm so glad I'm here. And go, great, what are you noticing inside? I'm noticing that I just am worn out, right? Like, how common is that, right? And you go, well, it must be so nice to just get a break, right? You're just kind of listening. And then the client says, yeah, and takes a nice deep breath. And you go, wow, that was a really nice deep breath. And you say, she says, yeah, I don't think I've been breathing. I think that I'm just running around so much, constantly have things to do, and I'm not taking nice deep breaths anymore. I know, I must be. And then you can go, ooh, okay, I just heard a lot of things right there. So what can you do? You can help that client take a minute to really feel what it feels like to take nice deep breaths. I mean, all this information just comes, it just flows, and you can then go with it. And then the client says, after taking a few nice deep breaths, wow, I really could do this more during my day. Like I could do it while I'm driving. Like ding! You know, again, it's these simple, simple things, but they make such a difference. And our capacity to regulate, our capacity to engage in self-care, our capacity to deal with the stressors that we have in our lives. And that's what this is all about. How can we as therapists promote this as much as we can in our clients? This is one more way. So Mark had asked me to talk about formal versus informal application of these skills. And he was really talking about the fact that I'm a researcher and I study this in a formal way where we teach people with an 8-week protocol and they learn this piece and this piece and this piece and this piece versus clinical practice. Now, I've been just giving you examples of, it has nothing to do with the protocol. You work with what comes in front of you, the very, very simple things you can do in your practice, in any session, in response to anybody. So, you know, when we teach this work, and we use the research protocol kind of formality to teach it because it's an easy way to teach it. But in clinical practice, we don't work that way. You know, the formality of a protocol is great for just the standardization of research, but in real life, you don't need that. You can do as much of or as little of this in whatever way you can, whenever it feels right. And I don't really have a whole lot more to say about that. But when to apply it and for who? So as I was saying, you know, a lot of the people we're training these days, you know, body workers are cautious sometimes when it's not comfortable, and this is new to them, and they're not sure sometimes about when to apply it and for whom, and how to manage any pushback. That's a concern a lot of times, and as I said, I think, you know, it's trying it out in the little baby ways. It's the baby steps, and see who's responsive. And you might be surprised, right? You might be surprised at the really kind of nonverbal guy who, you know, actually ends up loving the fact that you spent 10 extra minutes on his shoulder having him pay attention to how it felt inside. Because all of a sudden, he started to notice, make associations about what he was feeling and what his life is that he'd never done before. And it is enormously empowering for people to learn these things from their own internal experience. Enormously powerful. And so you would be surprised. So there are those people for whom this is really difficult, as I was saying. You know, there are people who really avoid experiential stuff, have a lot of trepidation about going inside because it makes them anxious. And it's often true for people who have chronic pain, because who wants to feel more of that, right? It's often true of people who have trauma histories, because the whole way of coping with any kind of emotional or physical pain, the normal way of coping, a healthy way actually of coping, is to get on with your life, and that means you can't pay attention. You have to kind of compartmentalize some of that off. But when we have chronic emotional pain and chronic physical pain, that doesn't work anymore. Those patterns are good for, you know, the more acute situations you have to live through. But those patterns get automatized, and then they're really not very helpful to us. And so this work is enormously helpful to help people shift out of those patterns and start paying attention and not being so scared of what's inside. But that takes some skill, and that takes learning how to do that and learning how to help your client carefully and safely go in a little deeper. And that's part of what we teach in our work. And the other piece, and Farah was talking about this a lot, is and Tara as well, you know, it's the co-exploration between us and our clients. But it's this piece about being comfortable with not knowing. You know, whenever someone says something and brings something up, a client brings something up in the moment, and you're left going, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. You know, that's uncomfortable, and that's usually when we go out of presence ourselves. And when we're going to follow the stream of someone's awareness and where it might take us, we have to be comfortable with not knowing ourselves about where that's going to go. And so it's a co-exploration between us and our client. And it's a different way to practice. It's a super different way to practice. And it does take that, okay, how can I stay inside myself? How can I just trust that the way forward will emerge? And if I just come back to sensation, you will be fine every time. Because you just go back to, what are you noticing right now in your body? If that is the only question you ever ask anyone over and over and over again, it takes away you having to feel like you have to figure it out. It takes away that feeling of, oh my God, am I going into the land of psychotherapy? Because all you're asking is, what is the sensation? What do you feel inside? And you stay focused on the sensation all the time. You just come back to it. So when you don't know, you just keep paying attention to that. You pay attention to it through your hands, what you're noticing in the body. You pay attention by what they tell you, what your client tells you. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about what we've learned from research around some of these things I've been talking about already. But in order to do it, I have to give you a little background about what the research involves, so you'll have some context. So I study this approach that is all about learning these really basic skills, teaching them to therapists. How do you teach your client to identify their sensation, to access internal areas of their body, and to stay there long enough that it has meaning for them, that information emerges. So it's a process called mindful awareness and body-oriented therapy. So it involves massage. It involves learning these skills of interception and mindfulness. And it involves this educational piece that I've been alluding to as well. So in our research, it's delivered by massage therapists. They get 8 sessions for 1.5 hours each. Half of the time is on the table, it's 45 minutes, and half of the time is seated. So there's a lot of relationship building, there's a lot of intake, and a lot of kind of reviewing what happened on the table before the person leaves the session. And all of that is because we're trying to teach people to use these skills in their daily lives. They're not just coming in to have the session, not think about it again until they see you next week. We're trying to teach them skills they learn in their daily lives so they can better self-regulate. So I'm going to tell you about a study that just completed last year, and now we've published the main results from. It was women. It was a 5-year study funded by the National Institute of Drug Abuse at NIH, and it was for women who were intensive outpatient treatment for substance use disorder. So all substances, alcohol, amphetamines, opioids, whatever. But it's an abstinence-based outpatient treatment. And we followed them for a year. So they came into the study. 1/3 of them were randomized to get this intervention. And 1/3 of them was randomized to get just the treatment. Actually, all of them were getting the treatment. So this is an intervention that's on top of treatment, okay? So everyone's getting treatment. About 1/3 only gets the treatment. 1/3 gets treatment plus this MABT, this mindfulness-based approach. And 1/3 of them gets a women's health education curriculum because we needed to prove that if people got better with mindful body awareness training, it wasn't just because they saw someone 8 sessions for 90 minutes and had a lovely relationship. So it's to control for what's called time and attention. So somebody in this third arm, they're getting individual attention for 90 minutes, 8 sessions at each, but there's no mindfulness training. There's no touch. It was a women's health education. So we followed them for a year. So they came in, and if they were getting MABT, they got it in those first 3 months, and we did an assessment. Then we saw them again at 6 months, did an assessment. Then we saw them again at 12 months, did an assessment. And then we look at the change across that entire year to understand whether, does this work help not only immediately, but does it have any impact a year later? Because that's what really counts, right? I mean, we all know that the immediate will probably help, but in the long term, does it still help? With just 8 sessions. So we did this work in 3 substance use treatment facilities in the Seattle area. And so that's the background. So I was telling you that these things in blue are the components of interceptive awareness, and the aspects of what we're training people is incremental. If we start with massage and this finding words to describe how you feel for the first 2 sessions, then we move into helping people learn to access their internal experience, access their bodies through some exercises. And then the last half of the intervention is focused on really sustaining awareness, mindful attention in very specific places in the body, often places in the body that are hard for people. They're places in the body where they have discomfort emotionally or physically. And it really lines up with these pieces of training and awareness, training and access, training and sustained attention for appraisal. So that's how this work is designed. And so what I'm going to tell you a little bit is some of the outcomes, not all of them, both participant outcomes, but also therapist outcomes, because they're both really interesting and they provide some insight into these different components that we're talking about in terms of why do they matter? Why do them? What's the impact? How does it help people? So anyway, that's what we're going to look at for a minute. So, there's a scale called the multi-dimensional assessment of interceptive awareness, which just asks people whether they've learned these skills. So you can see here that this is the immediate, just pre to post in the first 3 months. Those people who got the MABT are the ones where the line goes up, right? Everybody else, the treatment as usual group, the people who got women's health education, and the people who were assigned to the MABT group, it didn't really come. These are substance users. They often don't really come. But the ones who came, they learned what we were teaching them. So this is an example of some of the items. When I bring awareness to my body, I feel a sense of calm. I can use my breath to reduce tension. When I'm caught up in my thoughts, I can calm my mind by focusing on my body. When I feel overwhelmed, I can find a calm place inside. To do these things, you have to be paying attention. You have to be engaged in this kind of process and noticing how you feel. And so these women who had enormous trauma histories, these women all have substance use disorder treatment. They also all have PTSD. Their trauma histories would blow your mind. You know, they were physically and sexually abused as children. They had domestic violence experiences as adults. They've been using drugs for a long time, so they've had other kinds of witnessing of violence, being assaulted on the streets, having a lot of painful events in their lives where people close to them have died, right? They have witnessed more trauma than most of us in this room can even imagine. So in 8 weeks, they really learned how to do this. And that's remarkable. It's really remarkable. so these are just some other, just to graph what they also, so the BDI is depression symptoms. Again, the steepest line down are the group that got MABT. There was either no change or not much change. There was a little bit of change. They are all in treatment, so they're all getting better. So this is just that much more better for those who get MABT. And this is, the DIRS is a self-report scale of emotion regulation difficulties. Again, those in MABT are the ones that had less difficulties with emotion regulation. These are just immediate pre-post results. But let's go back to this fun picture of regulation. So when we were talking about why do you do this, right? Besides awareness, we want people to be able to regulate more, to be in better sort of general health where they're not so escalated so easily in response to stressors. And then if they are, they can help calm themselves down. So guess what really matters? What's a major risk factor for substance use? Stress. Yeah, negative affect. So depression, being stressed out for any reason. These are a bunch of women who, more than 50%, have child protective services involved in their lives because they're at risk of losing their children, or they already have. So they are enormous stress because they want their kids. And they have to go to court. And they have to be observed with their kids. They're under enormous stress. So to help them have some more skills so that they can function and they're not at as much risk for relapse is super important, right? So it's all about regulation. So we looked, it's the first time I had done any study where we looked at physiological regulation. We put electrodes on people. And it's called heart rate variability or respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And you're looking at whether whether people are more able to regulate just at rest, because their heart rate variability, the more variation is in their heart rate, the healthier you are in terms of your capacity to regulate. And so we were looking at that. How is it at rest and how is it in response to some other tasks that we did? And we also were looking at these other things. So I'll just go over this real quickly, but you can see here that it's a little bit tricky, but this is just the the treatment as usual group versus those who got this intervention. Resting RSA is the red line, and this is from 0 to 6 months. So you can see it's pretty flat, and you can see that the ones who got MABT, they increased their variability, and that's at rest. And the blue line above it is when they listened to a body awareness meditation. And you can see that that did not help them if they didn't get the MABT training, but it did, and it was maintained until 6 months. So what this basically tells us, and the p-value for those of you who know anything about statistics, was 0.002, which is extremely significant difference between these two groups, is that those who learned these skills were more regulated at rest, and they were more regulated when they listened to body awareness meditation, which is what they had been learning, these skills they've been learning. The more they did it, when they did it, they were more regulated because they'd learned these skills. So it helped, it's sort of a positive feedback loop that not only did they learn it because they told us they did, and self-report, but this information also shows it physiologically. So we were pretty excited by these findings because the whole theory, from neuroscience to my own understanding of why does this matter, was showing up physiologically in these results. So when you think about what you do, and why would you want to help someone be more present? And why would you want yourself to be more present? And why would you want to help someone have a little more capacity in their own lives to pay attention to how they feel in their bodies so that they can engage in more self-care? It's all about this. It's all about being able to be more regulated and how much better we feel when we are. And heart rate variability is really hard to change, or respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So it was exciting. So I'm not going to spend much time with this except to go to this slide. So remember when I was talking about when we teach these skills, the last half of the intervention is teaching people to come down to a very specific area of their body and then develop their capacity to stay there. It's sustained attention. It's what meditation is all about, is if I go out, can I come back in? Can I stay there? Can I be present in a place in my body? And so we saw that over the course, this is information from the therapists. At the end of every single session in research, our therapists have to fill out a form where they tell us not only did they do what they said they were going to do, so that's fidelity. We were trying to make sure we're making sure the therapists do what they said they're supposed to do. But it's also we ask them other questions, like what did you hear from your client in a session? Did they report? And what did you notice? So this is more what the therapist noticed. Were the clients able to stay in contact? Was it fluctuating in and out, but for longer periods than a few minutes? Was it steady for just a few minutes? Did it fluctuate just in and out for just a few minutes at a time? Was it so momentary that they were only in for 2 seconds and that was it? So you can see that over the course of 4 weeks, as they learn these skills, their capacity for sustained attention increased. That's what we want to see. So they're learning what we're hopefully teaching them, which is great. But then we're like, okay, so we're also asking these therapists these questions. Did any of these things happen that they reported? A shift in sensory awareness, a link between body-mind association, some sort of metaphorical story or image that had a lot of meaning to the person, some insight, a profound sense and shift in self. We're like, well, did those who had sustained attention versus those who did not, did the therapist hear more about these? So the people who had less capacity for sustained attention are in red, and the people who had more capacity are in blue. And you can see that the more capacity you had, the more these things were happening. There was shift in sensory awareness or body link or profound sense of insight. So basically what that tells us is that it matters if you can sustain attention in your body because you learn more about yourself. Things shift inside. You develop a greater sense of connection to who you are in an embodied way. And so this is kind of cool data that we were getting from the therapists, which matches what we're seeing with our statistical analysis on all of our outcomes. That the people who got all of the sessions, who were exposed to all of these skill building pieces, had better outcomes than the people who came 4 times and then dropped out. So it matters that you learn these skills and develop these skills. So on that, it's time for me to stop. We ask people if they practice these in daily life. That's the other piece that matters to us, and they report that they do a year out, which is pretty cool. And they tell us that this is really important to them because they didn't know how to manage their emotions before. They didn't know what they were. They tell us that they get easily escalated. They tell us that they need these skills in order to prevent relapse and be healthier in their lives. So in summary, it's possible to incorporate mindfulness into your practice. Mindful body awareness skills can reduce symptoms and increase regulation. Some clients need more help than others, and you can teach them. Sustained mindful attention is critical for better outcomes. And therapist presence and educational skills are key to integrating mindfulness into body practice, and you can learn those. So on that, I'll close.